Welcome everyone to this deep dive discussion on the evolving dynamics of the Russia Ukraine conflict, as laid out by Colonel Macgregor's recent analysis. Let's jump right into it.
I'm really intrigued by the ideas presented. What jumps out at you first?
Well, one of the major focal points was how high profile meetings, like Trump's with Putin in Alaska and his later talks with European leaders, are portrayed as potential turning
Yep,
points in this conflict. These discussions, although high in drama, seem to foreshadow the geopolitical maneuvers that could be crucial in bringing the hostilities to a close.
that's interesting. So, are these meetings hinting at a broader strategy or more a series of one off events?
It's a bit of both, really. It's like it's like they're trying to reconfigure the power structures. You know, the talks with European leaders appear to be an attempt to work through the coalition dynamics on the Western side, while the interactions with Putin on directly strategic points suggest a rethinking of bilateral engagements.
Mm-hmm. Right, and then there's that segment where the content delves into the nature of peace agreements versus mere ceasefires. What's your take on that?
Absolutely. That part highlights a major debate. On one hand, a ceasefire might provide temporary relief, but it doesn't address the fundamental issues at stake. The analysis pushes the idea that genuine peace would require a comprehensive reworking of territorial and security guarantees, rather than just a pause
Yes,
in
exactly.
fighting.
I've got to ask though, isn't it a bit of an optimistic view that such a thorough peace could be negotiated when emotions and historical issues run so high?
That's a fair critique. I mean, it's like expecting to untangle a tightly knotted rope by just pulling on one end.
Mm-hmm.
McGregor's points seem to lean on the notion that with the right diplomatic pressure and a restructuring of expectations, especially among the European allies and Ukraine's neighbors, a more stable peace might be achievable. He basically argues that sustained efforts in diplomacy might actually work, though it's certainly a contentious proposition. Yeah?
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of Ukraine's neighbors, the discussion touched on what they really want from this whole situation. Could you unpack that a bit?
Sure thing. Essentially, the analysis suggests that Ukraine's neighbors are caught in a balancing act, striving to both support Ukraine and avoid provoking further conflict that could spill over. It's interesting because their interests don't just align neatly with either Ukraine or Russia. Instead, there's a nuanced desire for stability, one that might sometimes even conflict with Western
Right,
strategies.
that's a really subtle point. So, in effect, these countries are looking for a middle ground that secures their own stability, correct?
Exactly. It's like they're dancing on a diplomatic tightrope, advocating for Ukraine's interests, but also ensuring that the broader regional balance isn't upset too drastically. This also connects with the broader question of the future of the EU and NATO.
Yes, the future of those institutions often seems in question when such conflicts intensify, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The analysis raises an important point. If the war ends on terms that compromise European leverage or security guarantees, then the entire fabric of alliances like NATO might be re-evaluated. And think about it. In the long run, the organizational structure of these alliances could be reshaped by the outcome of this conflict.
Mm-hmm. That's quite a potential shift. Now, another angle that caught my attention was the assertion that Russia might ultimately win the war. How does that line of reasoning unfold?
Right, now that's a provocative stance. The argument here, as laid out by McGregor, is that despite all the outward appearances, the internal dynamics and the strategic positioning of Russia, combined with its willingness to sustain long-term engagements, might tip the scales. It's a bit like saying, even if you look at the scoreboard now, sometimes the game isn't over until the final buzzer.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I find that perspective a bit challenging, though. Doesn't it assume that Russia's strategy is inherently more resilient given the current global reactions?
That's a valid challenge. The critique here would be that while Russia might appear to have strategic advantages in certain aspects, it also faces significant international pressure and economic constraints. The argument isn't a foregone conclusion. It's an interpretation of ongoing dynamics, suggesting that if the West's internal divisions persist, Russia's endurance might come into play more strongly than anticipated.
So, this is about a calculated gamble then on both sides, where internal alignments and vulnerabilities matter as much as battlefield tactics?
Exactly. And that segues into another crucial discussion: the role of U.S. security guarantees and the strength of the U.S. military moving forward. The analysis questions whether U.S. military might can continue to support Ukraine indefinitely, given its own broader strategic challenges.
Right, and that's definitely a tough nut to crack. And with those security guarantees, there's always the underlying issue of whether meetings between leaders, say Putin and Zelensky, could ever resolve the deeper impasses.
Yep, indeed. Another highlight in the discussion was the possibility of a direct meeting between Putin and Zelensky. The idea is that face to face talks, no matter how symbolic, could break down barriers. But it comes with its own set of challenges and is far from a silver bullet.
It's like trying to mend a fractured bridge with just a handshake. Right. And did the analysis suggest any concrete outcomes from such meetings, or was it more speculative?
It was a bit of both. It speculated on potential breakthroughs while acknowledging the historical and ideological hurdles that make any meeting fraught with tension.
Yeah, that's the tricky part. There's also that element of external influence, like the role of external sponsors and platforms, like nomad capitalists being mentioned. How do we see that fitting into the whole puzzle?
Oh, absolutely. Sponsorship segments like Nomad Capitalist's plug appear to bring in an extra layer of perspective, usually hinting at broader financial and strategic mobility. It's almost as if these sponsors underscore that geopolitical shifts also affect the global financial landscapes and personal strategic
Indeed.
decisions.
It sounds like every layer of this analysis, from high level political meetings to grassroots sentiments among Ukrainians, is interconnected.
Exactly. It's a multi layered narrative. One part of the discussion even zoomed in on how Ukrainians are feeling at this stage: discontent, weariness, but also a resilient hope for a future that might not hinge solely on military victories, but on political and diplomatic maneuvering as well.
Right, that human element is so critical. And speaking of human elements, what do you think about the portrayal of European leverage in the conflict? Is it a realistic take?
That's a great question. The content seems to argue that while Europe does have significant diplomatic and economic influence, its leverage is compromised by internal divisions and the diverse interests of its member states. It's like, trying to steer a massive ship. Every part of it has to be perfectly in sync, and any misalignment can lead to vulnerabilities.
I can see that. And doesn't that also mean that any unified European strategy might be more the exception than the rule given the current political climate?
Exactly. If you overestimate the uniformity of European interests, you might end up with plans that are too idealistic. There's an undercurrent in Macgregor's analysis that stresses how fragmented policy responses can actually undermine potential leverage.
Right? I agree with that point. It's like every move on the chessboard here impacts several interconnected pieces.
Yes, absolutely. Each decision, whether at the level of US military support or European policy, has cascading effects on the conflict's trajectory. And it really makes you wonder, what long-term strategies are being tabled behind the scenes that we might not even be fully
It's
aware
a
of.
complex game indeed. As we wrap up, could you summarize your take on how this deep analysis shapes our understanding of the conflict's potential resolution?
Sure thing. I'd say the analysis offers a layered narrative: major diplomatic engagements, the tension between ceasefire and a full peace agreement, the delicate balance of regional interests, and the underlying military and economic strategies all converge to paint a picture where no single factor dictates the outcome. Instead, it's an evolving interplay, a mosaic of influences that will, ultimately, determine whether a lasting resolution can be achieved.
Yep, very insightful. And while the prediction that Russia might win is certainly provocative, it pushes us to consider that victory might not be as clear-cut as a simple win or loss on the battlefield. It may be more about, reshaping global order and influence.
Absolutely. It's like a long chess game where even a so-called loss in one area could lead to strategic gains elsewhere. We might not see an immediate checkmate, but rather a series of moves that redefine the board.
Exactly. Overall, this discussion really highlights that while the paper offers strong arguments, there's a lot left up for interpretation. We have to keep questioning and analyzing, right?
Precisely, and that's where debates like these prove essential. It's important to challenge each perspective critically, even when the ideas are as bold as those presented by Colonel Macgregor.
Right on. This conversation definitely makes you think about how complex modern conflicts are and how intertwined political strategies really become.
Absolutely. And it underscores that in our global landscape, every negotiation and every meeting carries weight beyond just the immediate headlines. The long term implications are profound, and this analysis certainly gives us a lot to mull over.
No doubt about it. Well, that was a fascinating breakdown. Thanks for the deep dive and the engaging discussion on these intricate geopolitical dynamics.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure unpacking these multifaceted strategies with you. Until next time, keep questioning and stay engaged.